I'm Britt, this is Urban Wild and welcome back. So today I want to talk about podcasts I like and love and that I'd like to recommend to you. Basically podcasts that I believe every millennial should listen to. So while I was on my mini vacay from the internet, I discovered podcasts. I actually deleted my Apple Music in a bid to save money, which is one of my goals for 2017. And in doing that, I needed something to listen to while I was driving, so I found podcasts. I'd previously listened to podcasts before, but this started kind of like a new love affair in me. A real deep, passionate affection for podcasts, and I'd like to say that one day I really hope to make my own podcast too. On with what I want to talk about. Today we're talking about 5 podcasts I'd like to recommend you, so let's just delve right into it. The first podcast I want to talk about is Millennial. Millennial is made by Megan Tan, and initially it started as an audio autobiography. She is so likable and so relatable, and she basically opens herself up and shares parts of her life that a lot of other people don't share. It's about maneuvering your 20s and all the aspects that 20-something-year-olds go through in this day and age, like not having a job, struggling with money, when to get married to your significant other. They really talk about everything and I love it. As I said, it's a very narrative-driven podcast and it's quite immersive in through the use of sound, which is what I really respect, and I'm sure you will love it as much as I do. Alright, so let's swiftly move on to the next podcast. It's the first podcast I ever listened to, and it's Girlboss by Sophia Amoruso. Sophia is the former CEO and founder of Nasty Gal, and now she's like the CEO of Girlboss. So if you don't know what Girlboss is, Girlboss started off as a book, and it's basically about being the boss of your own life and a female entrepreneur. The reason I love Girlboss Radio so much is because it interviews really like girl bosses, but ones that have really made it or really successful in their respective fields. And in each episode, Sophia interviews them, ask them questions, get them to tell us a little bit about their backstory and how they got to where they are, and in that I find a lot of good lessons for being an entrepreneur of my own. And I think a lot of millennials these days have that aspiration to you know, be the boss of their own life, and that's what these interviews kind of give you. They give you lessons and they give you great inspiration and motivation to go out there and live your own life. The next one I want to talk about is called Ladies Who Lunch, and it's by Valdes and Ingrid Nilsen, who are YouTubers if you don't know. This is more of a conversational podcast. There's no interviews, it's conversations between the two hosts, and it really does feel like you're just having lunch with some of your best gals. They talk about a lot of topics that are often considered taboo and general day-to-day conversation, and they really opened my mind up to a lot of things that I have never considered about or thought about before. Some of the topics they've talked about is depression, anxiety, dealing with your insecurities. I think they've mentioned like sexuality, politics, everything that generally doesn't get talked about, which is why I love it. At the end of each episode they have letters from listeners, so there's a way that you can kind of partake in each episode, and it's also a way that you can hear other people's stories and also gain some type of lesson from those. Alright, so the last 2 podcasts I want to share I haven't subscribed to for a very long time. I haven't binged listened to like I did with Millennial, but I feel like they need to be shared in their own right. So the first one I want to talk about is Controlaltdelete by Emma Gannon. This again is a very conversational podcast, but it's also an interview-based podcast. Controlaltdelete is about growing up online and how the internet has affected you. As an internet person myself, and I'm sure you're an internet person too, these podcasts I find very interesting. They are interviews, but they feel more conversational because they're kind of like delving off and down different paths, and it doesn't feel like she's following any form of script. It just feels like friends having a chat and sharing their knowledge, which I love. So she's interviewed people like Estelle Lalonde and Liv Purvis to share their life story, how they got to where they are, and kind of just information that otherwise you would never get, because I know that the YouTube and blogging world is kind of like never talked about. So in these interviews they do talk about things like that, which is what I like. So if you're an internet person, you might really enjoy this podcast. The last podcast I want to talk about is called The Heart by Kaitlin Prest. Whew. This is like the only way I can think to describe this is like art. The Heart is narrative driven and it's super immersive in that it uses sounds to kind of put you in the environment of the story that she's telling. My favorite episodes that I've listened to so far is from the Ghost season, which is about like loves that got away or loves that kind of leave ghosts in your own life. Very narrative driven, and like I said, it's like an art form. So those are the podcasts that I've been listening to while I've been driving, and I found them to fill my life with so much joy. Like sometimes I've cried, sometimes a lot of the time I've laughed, but more than that, I've learned something. If you guys have any recommendations, please do let me know, because I'm a big fan of the podcast situation right now. Thank you guys for joining me for like another episode of Urban Wild. I will see you guys next Friday, and I hope you have an awesome week. Bye!